Hello, my name is Keshav, and I'm here to tell you what is influenza, the effects on the body, how it's transmitted, and how it works. Influenza is an active viral infection of the respiratory tract, which is considered to be one of the most life-threatening infectious diseases. In certain countries, seasonal influenza affects up to 40% of the population every year, with the worldwide death toll of 500 million. The virus is enveloped, which means the outer part contains a lipid bilayer taken from the host cell where the virus multiplies. The lipid membrane, there are glycoproteins known as HA and NA. These are the structures that determine the subtype of the influenza virus. People with the flu can spread it to other people up to 6 feet away. Most experts think the flu virus can spread mainly by droplets of people coughing, sneezing, or talking. These droplets can land in the mouth or nose of people who are nearby and possibly inhaled into the lungs. Less often, a person might get the flu by touching a surface or object that has flu viruses on it and then touching their own mouth or nose. The reported signs of symptoms of low pathogenic avian flu, a virus infection, humans have ranged from conjunctivitis to the influenza illness to the lower respiratory disease requiring going to the hospital. Highly people have been associated with a wide range of illness from conjunctivitis only to influenza-like illnesses, to serve respiratory illness with multi-organ diseases, sometimes accompanied by an HPA, Asian H5N1, have been responsible for most human illness worldwide to date, including the most serious illness to death.
Hi. My name is Abe Weiner, and I'm going to be talking to you about the history of influenza, with the focus being on the infamous Spanish flu that struck the world in 1918. Before I begin talking about that, though, it is important you understand a general overview of the history of influenza, or the flu. The first thing that is very important to understand is that the majority of strains of flu you hear about in the news, or people are most worried about contracting, come from animals, specifically birds and pigs. This is why you hear about countries such as Egypt in 2009 ordering that all pigs be killed, or even in the United States, where this past April 3 million chickens were killed in Iowa. It is the fact that these strains originate in wild animals that makes them so deadly. This deadliness, or virulence, has to do with the immune response we talked about in our last unit. We learned that the primary response is much tougher and lasts a lot longer than the secondary response due to immunological memory in the memory cells that occurs after the primary response. So antigens are saved. Due to the fact that this virus comes from the digestive tract in wild birds and pigs, when humans get it, they do not have the chance to develop immunological memory. So when they contract it, it is always a primary response. This is the exact same reason why parents are very nervous about their babies getting sick, because all the viruses they contract, they have no immunological memory for. Another piece of information that is pertinent for understanding the history of influenza is how the virus can change, and how this pertains to the pathogenicity and virulence of a particular microbe or virus. There are two types of way the virus can change: antigenic drift and antigenic shift. Antigenic shift is a minor mutation in the hemagglutinin gene of the virus, and it happens constantly. This is the reason we see seasonal epidemics and create new vaccines every year. Then there's antigenic shift, which, as the name implies, is much more dramatic. Antigenic shift involves the creation of a completely new hemagglutinin gene, and even a new neuraminidase gene. This shift is what was responsible for the Spanish flu, which was named H1N1. Both of these types of shifts can happen due to reassortment, which is something else we learned about earlier in the semester. The name H1N1 is derived from both the type of hemagglutinin gene and neuraminidase gene. Hemagglutinin is the protein on the virus that helps it attach to host cells, while neuraminidase is the protein that helps the virions exit the host cell and infect other healthy cells. The 1918 H1N1 influenza, in that influenza, there were two somewhat major mutations that have been discovered that occurred in the hemoglobin gene, which was due to the antigenic shift. These mutations allowed the virus to attach to cell receptors in cells that inhabited deeper, lower lung tissue, whereas influenza strains beforehand did not infect this deeper, lower lung tissue. This would cause victims of the virus in many cases to get pneumonia and then suffocate to death. This mutation also put the mortality rate of the 1918 influenza at 2.5%, while the seasonal epidemics beforehand had mortality rates around 0.1%. The 1918 virus is, however, most important to understand in its context within society at the time. The virus struck the United States in three waves. The first was in March 1918 and was noted in many Army camps in the United States, starting in Fort Riley in Kansas. However, not much attention was given to this first wave due to the fact that it was in the midst of World War I and was mostly secluded to military camps. In retrospect, many believe that more attention should have been paid to this first wave. Those infected soldiers were then sent overseas, where they lived in crowded barracks and trenches and infected many other soldiers, including ones from other countries. When these soldiers returned was when the second global deadlier wave struck. The wave struck especially hard in Spain. In Spain, the virus killed many and was also publicized more than in any other country, hence the name the Spanish flu. The second wave began in the United States during the fall, when in October 200,000 people died from it alone. This was made worse by many of the doctors and nurses in the country, either overseas or suffering from the virus themselves. 1/4 of the United States and 1/5 of the world became infected with this 1918 H1N1 influenza. In the United States, gauze masks had to be worn in public, and funerals were limited to 15 minutes. There was also a shortage of coffins, morticians, and places to put all the dead bodies. The virus wreaked havoc on society. This virus was also so devastating because it disproportionately infected younger, healthy people thought to be in the prime of their lives compared to previous flu epidemics. While there is no conclusive scientific evidence why this was the case, some hypothesize that older people may have had a minute amount of immunological memory that younger people did not. The fact that many younger people were living in unsanitary conditions in trenches and barracks also obviously did not help. A third wave occurred across the globe in the beginning of 1919. After this third wave, the virulence and pathogenicity of the virus seemed to decline steeply. This is due to the fact that at this point, many people had developed immunological memory and doctors became better at testing the pneumonia associated with it. In total, the virus killed between 20 to 40 million people. And in 1 year, the virus killed more than the bubonic plague did in 4.
A pandemic is a rapid-spreading infectious disease. A well-known pandemic is the influenza pandemic. Avian flu, also known as bird flu, is caused from the avian influenza. It is passed from bird to bird from feces, saliva, and food sources. Bird flu is very dangerous, and doctors and scientists are concerned about the possible pandemic arising. Avian flu is one of the most, if not the most, feared outbreaks because it's most likely to mutate. It would be a huge worldwide pandemic if it mutated. In local news, the avian flu has been hitting hard close to home. NPR states that it's the largest outbreak in U.S. history, affecting 20 states and tens of millions of birds. The disease is particularly ravaging farms in the Midwest. Due to this large outbreak, fairs in Ohio are banning all birds such as ducks, chicken, and geese. They are banning birds so the highly contagious disease hopefully doesn't enter Ohio. The H5 bird flu has not been detected in humans yet. In Iowa, thousands of birds have been killed in hopes of slowing the spread of the disease.
One way to prevent the flu is to get the flu vaccine. The CDC recommends a yearly flu vaccine as the first and most important steps in protecting against the flu viruses. Take everyday preventive actions to stop the spread of germs. Try to avoid sick people. Wash your hands often with soap and water. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Germs spread this way. You can treat your flu-like symptoms by getting plenty of rest. Also, drinking clear fluids like water. Sports drinks are helpful, or electrolyte beverages to prevent becoming dehydrated. Putting a humidifier in your room will make breathing easier. Gargling salt water will soothe the throat. And covering up with a warm blanket to calm chills.
The bitches off, play the chicken with the bread stuck to the bottom. But fuck my enemies, what you looking for, bitch, I got 'em. The bitch, I got 'em. The bitch, I got 'em. Fuck my enemies, what you looking for, bitch, I got 'em. The bitch, I got 'em. The bitch, I got 'em. Fuck my enemies, what you looking for, bitch, I got 'em. KFC, Hero Sharks or Popeyes. Adidas suit with a plate of chicken, got mob ties. A fresh dealt, weed crumbs on my pussies. I got my license, now I'm backseat fucking every week. A thick bitch, living Miller, go to work. 3:30 school was out, then I was fresh under her skirt. The project niggas hit that bitch, that pussy went berserk. Don't hit without that Trojan, fuck around, you might get burned. She was raised in the church, turned out in the